Welcome to the Sisterhood of Sweat. I am here today with Nischa Heron. Nischa Heron is a somatics researcher, pleasure activist, and the author of Fawn, When No Looks Like Yes, a rousing call to celebrate our authentic sexuality and invite more integrity into our bedrooms and pleasure into our lives. A trauma-informed embodiment coach for 14 years, Nischa first began studying the role of fawning and nervous system responses during intimacy in 2016 to better understand her own experiences, and started sharing her findings and recovery practices with her clients to great acclaim. Today, we talked about fawning and the responses. We talked about the flight, fright, freeze response, and just the disassociation we might have, the people pleasing, the freezing, not knowing how to say no, or that you have the absolute right to be saying no, and how to say no, how to set better boundaries, where boundaries start, where they begin, and just becoming more aware of our bodily responses, how our amygdala can freeze when someone's shouting at us and we might not even be able to think, speak, or act, and how to unlearn fawning, and so much more. This is a heavy topic. It's so good though. I think each and every woman could learn some things from listening to this episode today. And I wouldn't think you'd want your kids listening unless maybe they're teenagers or something like that. So today we're diving into how to say no, why to say no, how to stop fawning, and how to start getting more in touch with saying no and pleasing yourself, and not just feeling like you have to please everyone out there. You don't have to just be the good girl and always say yes to everything. So without further ado, we're going to dive into this topic with Nischa Heron. I said it wrong. Nischa Heron. There we go. I am so excited to welcome Nischa Heron to the Sisterhood of Sweat today. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
How's the weather out there? Where are you from?
So I'm from Toronto, but I'm currently about an hour and a half north in a kind of lakey, foresty area. June is my birthday month, so I always try to kind of unwind for that month. So I just actually came in from a paddleboard before this, which is really nice.
So cool. Now we're having crazy storms here, and the electricity has been out. It made us realize how much we really depend on all like the necessities, because the air has been out. People haven't been able to do their hair, all the lights, charge your cell phone, and then all of the traffic lights, and you can't open your refrigerator door or your food is ruined.
It's gonna go off, my goodness.
So it's been a crazy couple days for everyone. Somehow I wound up with power at work, so I'm like, good. But it just makes you realize how much you kind of depend on everything working for you just the way you want it to. And we're going to kind of dive into let the audience get to know you a little bit. You've written this book called Fawn, and if the audience is like me, they may not even know, like at the beginning, I didn't know what that meant. So I looked up the word. But just what led you to write the book in the first place?
So I am a survivor of developmental trauma, abusive relationship, sexual assault. This is the whole grab bag of unsavory experiences. And the book emerged after I got out of my abusive marriage. in 2016, I started re-entering the dating pool, and I was having these experiences with, I guess they were kind of more casual sex experiences, but they were so familiar. And what was fascinating to me about them was not just the familiarity and all of the ways I was abandoning myself in bed. I suppose that's the best way to describe it. And I was just like, I've been doing this forever. Like, this isn't just something that I'm doing with this, random guy that I've decided to hook up with. I've been doing this through all of my relationships. And my whole life, I believed that that was just me, that I was bad at relationships, that I never got the proper education, and that I was just kind of destined to live a life of subpar, suboptimal, intimate experiences, both emotionally and physically. And I had this one experience where it rocked me. And I talk about it in the book because it was so visceral. And I'm going to use a phrase that I kind of coined, the get out of my apartment hand job, is something that I think a lot of, or, leave me alone blowjob or whatever it is. This is kind of
sacrificial lamb.
Yeah, right. The kind of like, oh God, what do I have to do to get this over with?
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of thought that this was just what sex was. I thought this was just what intimacy was. And I was raised in a very strict Catholic upbringing. And there was this kind of message that, it's your duty as a woman to satisfy your partner's sexual desires.
Even if you're not wanting to at the time.
Exactly, right? And I know a lot of women were raised in this, whether they come from religious backgrounds or not. It's just this kind of unwritten story that we pick up, right?
Yeah.
And so what I learned from that experience, and I'll describe it because I felt everything was fine. We were making out and it was great. And then he all of a sudden jumped up on top of me on all fours and just growled at me. Like, his eyes were bulging out of his head. He was very forceful, and he was just like, we're having sex. And he kind of like I said, growled this, and I just froze, first of all. Yeah. But I mean, like that, we had a really fun, bantery kind of evening, we'd had everything was fine. And then it just on a dime switched. And I was like, okay. Because I don't know what's going to happen if I don't know how to say no to this person I don't have much history with. He hasn't given me any indication that he's a safe person to say no to, growling at me, pinning me to the bed. So in that moment, I froze. I felt my language center just shut down. My lips felt really tight. My jaw felt really tight. I couldn't articulate words. I couldn't even think clearly. I just went into autopilot of like, okay, well, I guess we'll just do this. But what happened? He lost his erection. Yay.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, but what was funny about it was that it didn't change how I felt in the moment. I still felt frozen. I still felt really activated. And at this point in 2016, I was probably a good 10 years into doing embodiment coaching and somatics research. So I knew that there was something off about this experience that wasn't simply an autopilot reaction, if that makes sense, that there was something deeper going on. Anyway, Whistler fuckboy, as I am fond of calling him, lost his erection, and I still gave him a hand job just to get him out of my apartment. It was just like, you need to leave, and the best way to get you out of there is to just get you off and get you on the way.
Yeah. You wanted to please him and get rid of him.
Exactly. And this is something, the more I talk to, women who have experienced unhealthy dating experiences or have toxic relationships, abusive relationships, this trend or I don't want to say a practice, a stress response, a coping strategy of dealing with people who are emotionally unregulated, who are completely unaware of themselves and their behaviors and the effects they have on other people, particularly when conflict arises, violent conflict arises. A lot of women have told me, like, oh my gosh, I totally did that. When he was raging, I would think, God, what can I do to like turn him on or like calm him down? Or maybe if I kind of come on to him and he'll stop throwing things and he won't hit me this time. Right. So I think what I feel like I've sort of given a really wide scope of where I came from and have come at this, but I think what I want to, the seed I want to drop into the conversation is that these behaviors are not because we're bad people. It's because they're biological, they're socially conditioned, and sometimes conditioned through our upbringing too. If we are raised in turbulent homes, we will learn to respond to people's emotional unavailability or aggression by trying to calm them down by being nice and, oh, maybe
Or
I'll just
protecting ourselves.
Yeah, right. So fawn really at its core is, like I said, a biological stress response that has, outwardly appearing behaviors that we enact in order to either save ourselves from harm or as a way to try and gain affection, attention, if we're being neglected or not being met in our authenticity. How was that?
That was really good.
Okay.
That was a great opener. And I'm kind of seeing, like, when I went with everything you said, that we need to learn how to give those things to ourselves so that we're not looking for them in someone else.
Mm.
That is probably like a basic like thing that I see when we're talking about this topic, because I've been through all of these things. People that have listened to the podcast, I was sexually molested by my grandfather at the age of 8 years old. And I glossed over that because I had to. And, I told my family at the time, but it was back in the day with all the the religious teachings and all the things. I didn't hang out with him anymore, but he was still a member at our holiday table. And it wasn't really dealt with. It was swept under the rug. And I felt this unwritten rule of not to speak about it. And I felt this shame. And I carried that for years, and probably until I was 55, and was listening to a podcast by Lewis Howes where he talked about his experience, which I think speaking about these things is really empowering because it really helped me to heal and become free and start and not living in shame and talking about it myself, and to also then heal from a multitude of things, to look back and see why a lot of things happened stemming out of all of that. Why you feel the way you do, why you might disassociate when you're having sex, why you're a people pleaser and you don't set boundaries well, because your boundaries initially were violated at your skin. And that's where boundaries start, is at your skin. And so I think just having conversations like these are very powerful. They're very important. And I'm just really happy to have you on. I think that's why I fell into a world of domestic violence, being married then to somebody that was physically abusive. And so I think you can just look at these things and you can heal. So I want to really dive in so people understand what fawning is, because I'd never heard of the term. And once I looked it up, it sure rang a lot of bells. So I think it's going to ring a lot of bells for a lot of audience members today, even just from being on a date, or,
Mhm.
like we were saying, you're just like, let's get this over with, like you're a sacrificial lamb, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I first want to say I'm sorry for everything that you've been through. I'm familiar with that journey, and particularly around the family piece,
Yeah.
because I only disclosed to my family 12 years ago,
Hmm.
and it was still brushed under the rug, and people today are disclosing to their families and it's being brushed under the rug. This whole idea of incest, we're still not ready to talk about it as a society, and it's
Right.
only becoming more common. There's a lot of research to show that it's particularly with, unfortunately, pedophilia is on the rise,
Right.
right, with the advent of the internet. So I think I really love how honest you are about that and talking about it. It's so important because it is
Yeah.
more common than we want to admit. And this is actually PTSD Awareness Month, so it's really great to have these conversations at this time. So thank you for being such a leader in that. So what is fawning? First, I think the thing I want folks to really see is and understand is that fawning is a biological process. It's a biological stress response. So it's happening in our tissues. When our tissues have this response, complete with all the neuroendocrine processes that go along with it, we exhibit behaviors on the external, which we can see and we may describe as like people-pleasing behaviors, or silencing ourselves, self-censoring. And part of the silencing and self-censoring, I think this is a piece that I really love to dive into, because that again is happening on the biological level. As soon as a fawn response is triggered, we lose connection to our language center. We also lose connection to the parts of our brain responsible for decision making and critical thinking. So even if we could use our words to talk about what we're feeling and the fact that actually this probably isn't going to be, authentic to me, I'd really like you to go home, right? We don't have access to the parts of our brain that are actually responsible for supporting us to make those healthy decisions for us. So the issue with fawn and any of the submissive responses that happen within a stress response cascade is that it inhibits our awareness of ourselves, our environment, and our relationships. So I think it's such an important conversation to have, because I feel I've experienced the feeling of being abandoned by my body, by being sabotaged by my body, feeling like I don't want to feel like this. I don't want to be doing these things. This is not authentic to me. And yet I can't control what's happening. It's like kind of being like an observer in your own life, where you're just watching these horrible things happening around you, where it's like, yeah, I don't want to do this, but here I am going along with it anyways. And like, yeah, I don't like him, but I guess this is happening, right? And so it's so important to really get a sense of how these responses are affecting us on the biological level. The problem then becomes the social conditioning that props all of it up, that tells women to be nice, to be pretty, to just sit quietly and be agreeable, right? Don't make anyone uncomfortable. Don't rock the boat. Don't get too big for your boots. Whatever you do, don't get too big for your boots. That was a big one for me growing up. I was told anytime I exhibited any form of confidence, it was like, you're getting too big for your boots.
I
Cockiness
mean,
doesn't suit you.
anytime you exhibited your own personal power.
Right. And this happens still, for little girls. And at the same time, little boys are being told, go further, go faster, punch the sky and go and do epic shit and take over the world. Right. So the other piece of this is that our biology is kind of working in tandem with our social conditioning, because while we go through puberty, the hormonal changes that happen for female bodies makes us more emotionally aware. It makes us more sensitive to other people. And because of what we're experiencing in the world with like social media and, let's face it, sexism that teaches girls that they don't have the same rights and freedoms as, young boys are going to have when they grow up. While girls are being taught to be, or while their bodies are priming them for submissive behaviors, and the brain development that happens for women actually predisposes them for people-pleasing behaviors as well. The testosterone increase that boys experience actually primes them for risk-taking behavior, for pushing boundaries, and for overconfidence. Now, this doesn't happen in all boys and all girls, but these are the effects of the surges in these different sex hormones that we experience when we're just 7 or 8 years of age, right? So it's like, while all these body changes are happening, while we're going through the turmoil of puberty and high school, oh my God, right? We're also getting all of this messaging. And I just can't imagine, especially for kids today going through, it just must be such an onslaught.
Or that our value is based on sex, or whether we're pleasing someone else, versus, I think when I really got my switch flipped, I remember it used to be thinking, oh, I hope he likes me. And then it was more like, I don't know if, am I going to like this person? It switched, because it should be based on you, on what do you want, and not all, is this person pleasing you? I mean, it shouldn't just be all, it should be a mutual thing, of course, but not all about you pleasing someone else, like you're subservient, and that all of your validation is going to come from this one individual. That places way too much, first of all, power in their hands, and makes you feel powerless. And I just think this has been done to women in general, like just in the way of the upbringing, the religious, like you said, all the things taught in religion. And I really like for us to examine some of this. And the fawning, I mean, I was reading up on that, the flight, the fright, the freeze. And I've experienced all of those. And they're all equally powerful. And the freezing, it could just happen if somebody is shouting. I know it happened to me, where they're shouting at you and demanding answers so fast, your brain, your amygdala, it literally freezes and you can't even respond. So I mean, if I see in your situation, the way you were talking about it, your brain just literally, you froze. How can we get people to the point where they don't freeze when something like this is happening?
Oh, that's the $1 million question, isn't it? Well, throughout the book, and this is my belief in all things, it has to be a team effort. If my partner is not willing to be aware of the ways that his conditioning has made it acceptable for him to overpower me, and for him to not prioritize my personal and sexual evolution as being at the same level of importance as his, then I am going to freeze and I'm going to fawn, because it's creating a relationship container where my authenticity is not, where it's not safe to be my authentic self. My authenticity isn't welcome. And the issue with all of these stress responses, it doesn't matter whether it's fight, freeze, fawn, blah, 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 all the F's, all the F words. They are triggered by an absence of safety and healthy attachment when we're talking about the context of relationships. So if my relationship is not creating this container for me to feel safe and secure in myself and with my partner, I am going to use those stress responses, because that is what stress responses are. They're responses to an absence of safety.
But couldn't it also be, though, if you think about, I mean, could it also be if you have, like I do, the PTSD from prior relationship, you could easily be triggered then in your new relationship, and maybe the person really isn't going to that level, but you've got to work on your PTSD too.
Of course. Yeah. Like, so this is sort of the other piece with it, right? Like there's this balance between personal responsibility and victimhood that I think we really have to tread carefully around. So again, bringing back to the example of my partner who is not willing to explore how his conditioning is making me fawn and perform and freeze in my relationship. In a secure relationship, I would be, even if there's some kind of rupture or, my partner experiences some form of reactivity that triggers me, there is going to be a commitment to repair, to lovingly repair and find ground together, so that you always get that feeling of security and safety. There's going to be ruptures. We're human beings.
Yeah.
Right. But the goal is not to never get triggered or to never have, issues in your relationship. It's to surround ourselves with people who have the capacity to love ourselves in our triggers, to meet us lovingly and accept us in our pain, right? Because we all come with a bit of history. We all have our own little pieces of tote luggage that we take with us. It doesn't matter what gender you are or your orientation, we all have this stuff, and we all, in coming into a relationship, it's part of our agreement is to be with one another lovingly in our stuff.
As we recently saw watching the Johnny Depp trial, that it could be either gender that feels the abuse. No judgment there, but I'm just saying, like, just to recognize it isn't just primarily female people that can be victimized. But also then I think there has to be, you may have, sometimes people take advantage if they think they can have some kind of power over you by easily intimidating you, by causing you to have a fight or flight response. So at some point in the day, we have to be able to own ourselves and figure it out to where we're like, okay, I don't feel safe around this person, or I have to set boundaries and enforce them.
Yeah. And this is the other piece of why fawning can be so tricky to dismantle in ourselves, because one of the effects of fawning is it causes us to dissolve our boundaries, right? On a biological, like body level. Again, we're having this like inhibition of awareness, dissolving of boundaries, lack of awareness of ourselves and our situation. So it really has to be baby steps of really working and committing to cultivating this somatic self-awareness of saying, okay, well, this doesn't feel good, or this feels familiar, and having the courage to love ourselves enough and accept ourselves enough to create space enough that we can remove ourselves from that situation, which is a process. And there's no shame in it taking 6 months or 6 years, right? I often say, and I say this in the book, that a SWAT team could have shown up at my door at any time and I wouldn't have gone with them. It just took me getting to that breaking point and actually seeing clearly that this isn't going to change and my life is actually in danger. And that's what was my final.
Well, I mean, for sure. And I can look back and see through my life, because the dysfunction really started at home. And I can see how boundaries were not properly taught, and that I had a lack of boundaries. And for the longest time, it was the people pleasing. It was very hard for me to, I don't know if I want to say no, but I mean, I was not, I was inept at, like, if I was out in the public and some man is kind of trying to chum up to me or be kind of uh, getting in my grill, so to speak,
Mhm.
I was inept at, getting them to clear until I still remember I wasn't much of a cursor, but I was in a bar and I just remember this guy just trying to get up on me, and I was trying, saying no, nice, of like your mother taught, no, 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 please no. And
Smiling, ha ha
yeah,
ha. Yeah.
yeah, 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 smiling. Oh,
Hee
no,
hee.
no. Yeah, yeah. And finally, it was get the F off of me, you MFer. And
Yeah.
that is what worked.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Mom. But I'm just saying, like, I had to really make some changes along the
Mhm.
way to learn to protect myself.
Yeah. I mean, you have to think about it. Like women within a patriarchal ideology, women are um, patriarchal heteronormative paradigm. Women are the devices with which men experience gratification, right? So we are taught from day one that saying no isn't really an option, right? We're not taught to say no to our parents. We're taught to obey. We're not taught to say no to our teachers or anybody else who might be in a position of power. We're taught that we need to go along with it and do what we're told and be good, that being good means denying our truth, denying what feels authentic for us, and ignoring our instincts, right? So that whole piece of learning how to say no is partly because we're taught that saying no is bad and that saying yes and going along with things is good, that that's how you be a good girl and that's how you get the job or get the boyfriend or whatever it is. That those are the sort of unwritten sociosexual scripts that are like so deeply ingrained on a body level. And you can feel that just in that example, that it's sort of like, oh no, oh no, oh no, but that you have to get that angry in order for someone to hear you is so problematic. And then, getting that angry means risking being thought of as being crazy, right? Or unreasonable, because female anger doesn't have the same validity as male anger. We see female anger as a sign of
He did
insanity.
get kicked out of the bar
Oh,
though.
did
So
he? Good.
yeah,
Okay.
so
Good.
it wasn't just me. He was obnoxious, and
Okay.
I guess other people had the same problem trying to get rid of him. Um, but that's just one of the
Yeah.
many experiences that I could look back upon. And you realize, I mean, I've had Terry Cole on the podcast, who's the boundary boss. And I learned so much from her. And this is very, I learned so much just in researching this today, really, in reality, about how much more work I might have to do, and how much work, in general, we have to do as women to kind of flip this conversation and start saying, yes, of course we want to make people happy, but it should not be to our own detriment.
100%. Yeah. I think these stress responses have kind of given the world the impression that that's what femininity is, right? To like go along with it and nurture and just make everybody happy because
And
that's
have
what
no
we
needs of your own.
needs. What are those? Right. But I think the one thing, and you mentioned at the beginning, and this is something again that I talk about in the book, is the idea of boundaries. And you talked about them being physical, that it happens at skin, and boundaries are actually energetic. They begin in the space that surrounds our bodies, the kind of 6-foot bubble that we have around ourselves. And you can feel it when someone gets too close to your body, you kind of get that sensation of, whoa, there's a threat. There's something that's come into my physical energetic space, which is part of my body. right? I take it with me wherever I go. That is either proving to be threatening or in some way uncomfortable for me. So I think when we talk about boundaries, one of the ways that we can begin to cultivate more awareness of our physical boundaries is to pay more attention to our energetic boundaries, because while subtle, they are there, and they then start to inform how we feel in conversations with people, how we respond to the way
Yep.
our superior at work stands,
Yes.
or how they carry their bodies when they're talking to us, right? So all those little subtleties can have really, really profound effects on how we inhabit our bodies and our relationships. So that's something that I would love to leave with people to
And
give
I
some
love
thought.
that you said that, because I really discovered in all ways that I literally wasn't setting boundaries. And one of the ways Terry Cole says you can recognize it is you start getting resentment.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and you have to learn that your space is your space to protect. Your energy is your energy to protect.
Mm-hmm.
Your body is where you live, and you don't have to invite anybody into it. And just so many things. Just start with those three, and that could be life changing. And if you're already a boundary boss, make sure when you hear this episode to DM me on Instagram and let me know what you do, because I love hearing great tips and I'll share them with the audience. I think that this is a really important topic. I'm so happy that you wrote this book, and it took a lot of vulnerability, really, for
Mm-hmm.
you to talk about your story and to write this book. So I commend you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a deep dive for sure. Thank you for that. It's
Yeah.
No one
So
talks about how difficult, or people, I mean, some people talk about how difficult book writing is, but it really is, especially when dealing with topics like you do and like this, you're really excavating the deepest layers of your being to bring something forward. So
well, I mean, and if you identify with any of this that we talked about today, like laying there, not enjoying it, or any of it,
mhm.
or disassociating, which means you're thinking about something else while you're having sex with your partner or your person or whatever, this is a thing to just kind of get you started thinking, a catalyst to create change in your life. So if just that one thing happens today, that was a big thing. So again, I thank you for coming on
No
today.
problem. Here's the book.
And there's the book. Can you read it
It's
off? I can't
it's
see the
it's
bottom.
it's backwards. I don't know if,
Oh.
but it says it's fun when no looks like that, when no looks like yes. And the little subtitle is how your nervous system is making you miss red flags, question your own boundaries, and play nice in bed.
So great. Where can they get a copy, and where can they reach you on social media?
Yeah, so it's on Amazon, and it'll be out in like Barnes and Noble and all those lovely stores probably sometime this summer. On social media, I'm at Nischa Heron Phair on Instagram. My website is www.nischaheronphair.com, and I just joined TikTok. I'm kind of messing around on that, trying
That
to.
sounds fun.
Well, yeah, I feel like I'm just playing and trying to be irreverent, and that's kind of enjoyable
I
always,
love
right?
to play on the reels. That's so
Yeah,
fun.
yeah.
So I'll have to look you up on TikTok. Everybody be
Yeah.
sure to get a copy of Fawn. Give Nischa some love on Instagram and give her a follow. And as always, keep on keeping on. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye, everybody.